Wait, what happened? Ah, okay.
So, not alone, so there are a few months of the.
Yeah, there's also we have teaching still. This week we had teachings, but Geshe-la was hurting his back, so he couldn't sit on the throne or couldn't sit at all. So we had two days we were canceled. Complete chaos here and rain.
You're
So
not getting bored there.
what's that?
You're not getting bored there.
No. We are. There's always something going on. For example, the group in Cluj is going on.
Yeah.
So I understand that Marius is not here.
No, he couldn't come today.
Okay, cool. And you had a discussion before this, no?
Yes, we had.
Did you have any questions from that?
Do you want to talk something? Ask something for that? What you have talked? Yes, I'm just going to ask you several. So, yeah, it's a person who wants to ask something. Hello.
Hello.
So, my question would be Julia. No, my name is Julia. So, if it's ethical when we are trying to be compassionate and love and kind with the others, what if we are too much? We are offering too much compassion, too much love, and we exaggerate with taking care of the others. If it's ethical to offer them everything, even if they don't need the help and compassion, maybe how we can live with this situation.
Okay, I didn't hear this completely, but I think it was about if you can have too much compassion or if you can offer too much help that is not asked for,
Yes.
and other people actually don't want that, and so forth. Is it
Yes.
about that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so here the topic is what is called crazy compassion and compassion combined with wisdom. Yeah. So, for example, if you have somebody who is a drug addict, yeah, you would not kind of make generosity to this person by giving drugs. Yeah, understanding that this is actually destroying the health of the person and destroying the whole life of this person and so forth. Or if you would have somebody who is a part of a gang or something, then you would not kind of try to be kind to this person by giving him a present in form of a gun or something, yeah, or a knife. Yeah, so you have to have wisdom together with your generosity, with the different virtuous activities. So with your compassion in general. And I think one of the most striking examples is mothers that are taking care of their very young child by way of constantly giving sweets to this child and constantly feeding the child and constantly putting yet another sweet or another piece of cake into the child. And the child is kind of 7 years old and is incredibly, like not just a little bit, incredibly overweight. Yeah, it's really, really fat. It's completely like a ball. It's really, really harmed physically in a very young age from a mind that only wants to give and only wants to take care and so forth. Yeah. So these would be all examples of what you could call a crazy compassion. And therefore, the point of this is that we have to combine this compassionate action with wisdom, with an understanding. Yeah. So that means, so compassion is actually in Buddhism is defined as the wish that the other person might not suffer. And love is defined as the wish that the other person may be happy. Yeah. So if you have this definition clear, then you can also very easily discern between attachment to somebody and love for somebody. Yeah, love has nothing to do with what you get back at all, zero. It is only about kind of giving to the other person, and only be of benefit to the other person. So then the question, of course, arises: what is actually happiness, and what is actually the cause of happiness, and what is suffering? What is the cause of suffering? Yeah. So the more you understand these topics in great depth, the more this understanding itself is a wisdom. So this wisdom then can go together with your compassion. Yeah. Then you will understand what is actually an action that is really benefiting the other person. What is an action that is really taking away suffering from the other person and so forth, as opposed to actions which look like on the surface that you're kind of generous or you give something and you take care, but actually they're harmful for the person. Yeah, so this wisdom is very, very important. And of course, Buddhism is to some extent all about that. Buddhism is all about getting free from suffering and bringing forth more and more forms of stable and even kind of and more intensive forms of happiness and even bliss and so forth. So it's all, you could say, it's a science of happiness. So the more we understand what the Buddha is saying here by way of not just having studied it, but also reflected on it and checked it out with ourselves and maybe put into practice and so forth, yeah, then the more we have a wisdom with regard to what is suffering and how to abandon that and what is happiness and how to achieve that, then on that basis, this wisdom will inform our compassion and our loving actions, right? So this means, for example, one could apply this, for example, to communication. Yes, that you are kind of going to somebody and you talk to this person and you feel like this person is alone, this person needs to be talked to and so forth. So if this is true, then that's a good action. But you need to read the signs. You need to be open for where the other person is. Maybe the other person indeed just wants to be left alone. Yeah. So again, maybe the other person does not necessarily need something from you right now. If you think about the Buddhas, for example, the Buddhas in their omniscience, they're completely perceiving our state of mind, any kind of karma we have, any kind of impression, habit or character traits we have, and so on. They know much, much more about ourselves than we know. And so sometimes they understand right now, nothing can be done for this person to improve. So they wait. They're patiently present, all the time loving and compassionate, because they always want us to be happy and they never want us to suffer, but they want us to be free from suffering. So this attitude stays, but there might be no action for the time being. Only if the action is possible, then immediately they will act. There's not a split second in between. So the moment there is an opportunity for them to act, they will act for our sake. But there might be moments where there is not much to be done. So that means you can have a compassionate attitude without necessarily being active by understanding this situation. So it's really an attitude, the compassion. Yeah. Yeah. It's a state of mind. I can illustrate this by way of generosity. Generosity is a practice where you are generating a mind that is willing to give everything at any time. That's completely opposite to attachment or wanting to own or clinging to something. Yeah. So it's a mental attitude. And to perfect that is not that there is no poverty anymore on the planet. Because if that would be the perfection of generosity, then the Buddha would not have perfected it, because the planet has all kind of poverty in all kind of places. So what the Buddha has perfected with generosity is his attitude of being willing to give everything at any time. So it's a mental attitude. The same thing is true for compassion. Compassion is a mental attitude. It's a willingness at any time to do something in order to remove the suffering if there's such an opportunity. And love is also the attitude at any time to bring about that the other person be happy. Yeah? So to enhance that and so forth. But maybe nothing can be done. So to understand what is to be done is actually not so much the job of compassion, but of wisdom. Yeah. So the more experience with our life, with our own mind, with our own feelings we have, the more we can understand what this other person actually needs. Otherwise, we end up in this kind of situations where these mothers are feeding their children all the time sweets and cakes and and they get sick from it. Yeah. Is that an answer? Is that kind of in the direction of what you were asking?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's clear.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
We've got more questions.
I have a question, but it's not related really to the listening.
We've got another question from Andras.
sorry.
on that.
Hi. So I have a question.
Raj.
My question is that if in Buddhism everything is determined by prior conditions and cause and effect, how exactly is a motivation or like a right intention formed or wrong intention? So my question is like, for example, people who are Christian, they believe in the concept of free will, that we possess a free will that is separate from cause and effect. And so, I don't know, in Buddhism, is Buddhism like a worldview where everything is deterministic, or is it a worldview where you possess free will? So, yes.
So that's a very, very interesting question. um, so this topic is never made an actual point of discussion anywhere in the Buddhist teachings. Yeah. So what this indicates already is that the concept of free will is very much a Christian or Judeo-Christian topic. Yeah. So these religions have a need for the concept of free will. Yeah? They need that. It's part of their explanation of how the world works. Because what you have is probably you don't have any religion that would describe the creator God as evil. They would say the creator God is loving and caring and has only good qualities and so forth. At the same time, his creation is a mess. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that the planet is full of war, starvation, all kind of sicknesses, the coronavirus right now and so forth. So there is a question here: how is that possible if the Creator God is loving and compassionate and omnipotent and so forth? Yeah. So one way to explain this problem away is by saying that the individual beings living here in this creation, they have free will, or at least the human beings have free will, and this is why there's war, because they're abusing their free will. Yeah. And in this way, you can purify the Creator God from the accusation that he created suffering. Yeah? This is, by the way, indeed exactly the accusation that Buddhism would bring to a Creator God. It would say that this Creator God created suffering, with the distinction that they say, but such a Creator God doesn't exist. Yeah, so that's, if there would be such a Creator God, he would be responsible for suffering. Which would mean if you want to become happy and if you want to help humanity to become happy, you would have to fight that Creator God, because he's the cause of suffering. And that's what Buddhism is about, trying to find out what is suffering, where does it come from, what is final cause, how to remove that. So if the Creator God would be the final cause of suffering, you would have to fight the Creator God. And indeed, actually, if you look into the literature that the human beings have brought about, you will find something like this. There is some novels or something where it's about to fight the Creator God and stuff. Anyway, so you need, obviously, as I said, most religions would not say that their Creator God is evil. Yeah, so especially Christianity wouldn't say that. Yeah, so it's with Christianity, everything is difficult because you have the Trinity, and so you don't know exactly how this works and so forth. Is Jesus Christ the Creator God, for example? Is that the case? I don't know. This is kind of difficult there, especially in Christianity. The other religions don't have that, like in Judaism or in Islam. They don't say that there's a Trinity or something like that. So I don't know how this works. I once saw back in my hometown in Munich, I saw a clock from maybe from the Renaissance or from the Gothic times, and it had on top, it had a Godfather on the one hand, the white man, the man with the white hair and the white beard and so forth, and Christ on the other side. And God Father was wielding a sword of punishment, and Christ was holding the sword. So as if the different parts of the Trinity have different functions or something like that. So it's kind of difficult. Anyway, that's not our problem. It's a problem for the Christians to deal with this, and it's a problem ever since even Saint Augustine has already written on this. So it's their specific topic, just like Buddhism, the specific topic is emptiness, for example. Yeah. So in these religions, you need this concept of free will in order to explain why there is war and why there is starvation and why there is inequality and pain and suffering and so forth. Yeah. So they really have a topic there. Buddhism doesn't really have a topic there. If you read the Buddhist instructions, it is very clear that the Buddha is, or the masters are saying, look, why don't you practice that? If you practice that, you have this kind of outcome. So they really try to convince you. So try to make you walk into a certain direction. So in other words, they want you to choose to enter into the path because they feel like from this you will improve your standard general state of affairs, your life, your happiness, get rid of your suffering and so forth. So they want you to choose that, to be motivated to practice in this way. So it is very clear that Buddhism is saying from the outlook that you can choose that. And actually, they would go one step further. You're the only one who can choose that. It's nobody can choose this for you. Yeah, so that's very clear. That on a daily basis, it is up to us if we go to this evening talk, or if we go somewhere else, if we go for a cinema, or if we're interested in spirituality, or if we want to make more money, or we just want to go drink somewhere, something, or whatever. Yeah. So that's, for Buddhism, it's pretty established that there is these choices. But then there's much more to be said about this. So, for example, one of the very, very bedrock statements of Buddhism is that all beings want to be happy and they don't want to suffer. Right? So that's very, very important. So, because this is what all Buddhism is about. It is about answering to this wish for happiness, to make it happen, and answering to this wish to be free of suffering, and to actually bring about that people are free from suffering. So this is what why the Buddha is teaching, because we want to be happy and we don't want to suffer, and we do experience happiness and suffering. So the Buddha is about that. But that means, on the other hand, that this is already an inner law. We will always choose for that what we think is the better option within what makes happy or what makes suffer. And so from the outstand, it is very clear psychologically that there is a certain law in place in our mind, in our soul, if you like, how we make choices. So which choice we make will depend on what understanding, what wisdom we have about what are the causes of suffering and what are the causes of happiness. So due to our understanding, or maybe misunderstanding, of what are the causes of happiness, we will choose for that. So to some extent, we are predictable. We will probably go for that because we think that this makes us happy. Then we learn something about what we thought makes us happy and what other happiness is possible, what other causes there are, and so forth. And then we might choose for that because we understand that this is actually giving us a more profound happiness, or a more lasting happiness, or more freedom in our actions and so forth. So there is definitely, by this very nature of ourselves, that we want to be happy and we don't want to suffer, many things will be determined from that point of view. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's also pretty clear. So that our understanding determines things, and our wish to be happy, not to suffer, determines things, is pretty established, I would say. Yeah. So still, out of this wish to be happy and out of our current state of wisdom and insight, we will then choose. Yeah. So still, you can say there is this choosing. And there's another phrase that I came across in the teachings. One phrase that comes again and again is that we are not free, we are under the power of karma and afflictions. Yeah, we are under the power of other factors, karma and affliction. There are other factors because they can be eliminated. They're not really part of us. They're our afflictions and they're our karma, but they can be eliminated. And so they're kind of called other factors. So in other words, we are not free, we are under the power of someone else, kind of thing. So that's kind of pointing towards that we are kind of governed by something and don't have that much choice. Due to not our lack of understanding about the world and the mind and our emotions and so forth. And then also because we simply have these patterns going on inside of us. And unless we break these patterns, we will follow them. Yeah? So there's also a certain determination there. So then I thought, oh, that's cool. So Buddhism is about to break free from determination. Yeah. So you get free of this karma and these afflictions, these other powers and so on. And then I found the phrase that the Buddha is under the other power of compassion. Yeah. The Buddha cannot other than help because he's completely limitless compassion and limitless love. And there's nothing wrong with that. Buddha has no choice. He cannot choose to harm us. No problem. No problem. The Buddha has no choice to be in highest bliss and peace. No problem. You see, the whole topic of this free will is pretty strange if you look at it from this point of view. So Buddhism is not about free will. Buddhism is about happiness. Buddhism is about freedom from suffering. Yeah? And Buddhism is about developing your highest potential. Yeah? That you would opt for that might have to do a lot with that you want to be happy and you don't want to suffer. It will have also a lot to do with that naturally we have a certain level of compassion and love in our mind, which can be developed much further. And at one point, out of your wisdom, understanding suffering and happiness and so forth in your own continuum, this compassion might make you into actually want to work for others, so that the others also get free of their suffering and are actually able to develop stable forms and fulfilling forms of happiness. Yeah. So this would be the Mahayana, where you then actually go towards Buddhahood in order to help all other beings. You want to become like the Buddha. So, so that's what Buddhism is actually about. It is about happiness and freedom from suffering, which is its topic because it's at the very heart of our existence. It's part of our nature of being alive. Yeah? Having a mind, having feelings. We want to be happy, we don't want to suffer. So that's what Buddhism is relating to, not to get a free will. Yeah? So that's not a topic for Buddhism, really. Do you see my point? My point is that in other religions, it's a central point because it's necessary to build up their description of the world, how there's a loving creator God while there is war and starvation. Yeah, for them, it's an essential point. For Buddhism, it's not an essential point. Buddhism is not about free will. Buddhism is about getting rid of suffering and attaining happiness. Okay? Does that make sense so far?
Yes, thank you.
Then I give another round, another aspect to this. If you look at free will, this is my personal thinking, so it's not from the text. So let's play this through and then see what you people think about it. So when I say free will, what do I actually mean with that? Isn't it that I'm saying I want to be free? Nothing shall influence me. I want to be without causes and conditions. I will not be influenced by somebody else or by something else especially, but I'm completely free. Okay? But I have a will. I will influence others. But I shall not be influenced by anything. But I will influence others. I have a free will. There's a contradiction in itself. It's a contradiction in itself. You are influenced by other things and you're influencing other things. You are exchanging back and forth all the time. This whole idea of free will is contradictory. Doesn't make sense. You have to think that you are free. You shall not be in, or you want to be free. Let's say I say I want to have free will. I shall not be influenced by anything, but I shall be able to influence other things. That's contradictory. That doesn't make sense. And it already touches a little bit on this topic of emptiness, where we think there is a certain core inside of us that will be untouched by any cause and condition, but that will influence the world. That's very, very interesting. It's really, you know, this whole thing, why free will is attractive to us, might be connected with this grasping for a self, which is exactly the root of all our problems. A misunderstanding about how we exist, and out of which we are then relating to everything around us and the whole universe and to other people also in a completely twisted way, and perceive them also in ways that they actually don't exist. Do you see that? That's a very interesting point for me. How this grasping for a free will is actually a contradiction in itself, and is probably related to this grasping for a self. The root affliction of Buddhism, which is what we need to get rid of in order to get rid of samsara. Does that make sense?
Yes, I thought this through last week, and I came pretty much to the same conclusion, but it also has like a consequence that basically what we do is determined by cause and effect. And is it true to say that you can basically accumulate so much negative karma that, for example, you can't overcome it? Or because it seems like that if everything is determined by cause and effect and prior conditions, that everything is predetermined. So it's like a kind of destiny that you will either attain enlightenment and nirvana and freedom from samsara, or you will just keep going down to the lower realms.
Okay.
So
yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So so this is an interesting point as well, which is a little bit touching on the topic of Buddha nature. Yeah. So in Mahayana, at least, I don't know what the Hinayana would say, but in Mahayana, you say that every sentient being, yeah, every human being, even every animal, even every insect has Buddha nature. So that means that the capacity to become enlightened is indestructible, is always there. Yes, you cannot lose that ever. You might be in very dire straits, in very dire situation where you cannot practice much, but your actual potential to become enlightened is never, it cannot be destroyed. Unless you actually become enlightened, then there's no longer a potential. So you could discuss if the Buddha has Buddha potential. Maybe not. I don't know. To be seen. This is an academic discussion. But let's take an insect. Yeah, an insect has Buddha nature. An insect is in samsara because it is taking rebirth under the power of karma and afflictions. Yeah. So due to ignorance about how it exists, it is creating all kinds of afflictions and is engaging into actions which accumulates karma. This is activated into a next life. Is here now on this level of an insect. So all these things can be eliminated. All these afflictions, all this ignorance, which is the root of the afflictions, or even all the karmas that are connected to this continuum, can be purified and can be eliminated. When they are eliminated, you're enlightened. I mean, first of all, you would be liberated, but there's more obscurations. That if you would remove anything that is kind of fake or a misconception or a distortion of reality, if you would remove all of this, you get a Buddha mind. Yeah. So this capacity to remove these stains, as they're called, the stains in the mind, is never lost, however horrible the situation gets. So this very insect here will, first of all, definitely die out of this state. And then within samsara, everything is possible again. Could become a human being in the next life. Yeah, so there's nothing inherent about this insect that it has to be kind of dumb and be eaten by birds and stuff like that. By dying, it can transform into something very different. Within samsara still, but it can be all of a sudden in a peaceful country with affluence, with health system, intelligent like a human being, maybe a spiritual interest and so forth. Yeah, so this being can change into another state. Right now, even if the Buddha would sit next to this insect and would explain to him all the teaching, wouldn't understand a thing. So right now, while the Buddha nature is still there, and all these obscurations in the mind and stains of the mind can be purified also for this animal, right now it will not be able to do much or close to nothing to change that. It will not be able to practice. So that's also clear. Yeah, but this situation itself is not fixed. It will even naturally by death die out of it. Yeah. So there is different types of rebirth which have different capacity for spirituality. And this, of course, is touching on the topic of what is called the precious human rebirth. How the humans have a rebirth which is very qualified for spiritual practice, and therefore we should use it to the max. Because there's such millions and millions and myriads of other rebirths which are not qualified in this way. And by the way, this is not just talking about a human rebirth, it's talking about a precious human rebirth, where you're coming with a certain interest in Dharma already. So that's, again, coming back to your topic of predetermination. So you bring out of other lives already a certain kind of interest in spiritual practice. And then this is possible. There is actually groups or that are practicing together. There's teachers. There's texts available. The Dharma, for example, has been taught by the Buddha. Buddha came to the planet and so forth. So you can talk about many phases in human history where all of this was not present. So people were maybe living an affluent life, maybe a safe life, maybe there was some medicine, there was maybe peace and so forth. But that wasn't a precious human rebirth, because it lacked the possibility to really deeply understand what is happiness, what is suffering, what are the causes for this, what does samsara mean, what is death, how death is not the end of everything because mind is indestructible, but there will be rebirth, what is governing rebirth, karma, all these ideas. It's not self-explanatory. So you can have a human rebirth with safety, affluence. People might be very nice to each other. They might have some psychology, how to deal with problems and how to improve your communication and so forth. And yet this is not a precious human rebirth because it does not entail really deep spirituality. So I'm just saying that because this shows how, while you always have Buddha nature, however horrible your state in samsara is, and there's much worse states than being an animal or an insect, nevertheless, all the problems and all the limitations that you are subject to can be removed. And this can be removed is the Buddha potential. You're actually empty of these kind of stains. Yeah? They're kind of what's called adventitious stains. They're not part of the nature of the mind. So this is never lost, even for an insect, even for further down and so forth. So what can be lost is, let's say, animal nature. Because at one point I thought to myself, oh, that's cool, Buddha nature, you will never lose the potential to become a Buddha. What about Hitler nature? You will never lose the potential to go so worse that you become Hitler or something like this, you know? And you don't want that. So that's quite interesting because Hitler nature can be lost, can be destroyed. Buddha nature cannot be destroyed. Yeah. So while you are in samsara, indeed, as long as you are there, it is always possible that you end up with something like Hitler, or I don't know, worse maybe. There might be beings that can do even worse things than that. This is always possible. So within samsara, you have this potential for pretty much anything. Yeah? You have a worm potential, you have an insect potential, you have a lion potential, you have I don't know what, being a cow or somewhere in one of these factory like cow, I don't know, cow factories, I don't know, milk factories. Yes, we have this potential, but this can be destroyed. If you destroy samsara, all these potentials are gone. You will no longer take a samsaric rebirth. Yeah. So I don't know what I'm talking about this. I think I'm talking about this because of being determined that things can go so bad that you can never go out of this. So this is not possible. Yeah. The possibility to exit the whole thing is indestructible, while the possibility to be one of these samsaric states is destructible. Does that make sense? I know. Is that still on your question?
Yes, thank you. So I will keep thinking about it.
Okay, cool. I like it. I like it. Great. You have any other questions here? No, everything crystal clear. That's just amazing. So thank you very much for discussing this stuff. This is really, really at the heart of here Tibetan Buddhism, and especially the tradition of His Holiness, the Gelug Buddhism. It is really, really, really encouraged very strongly to not just read books or just listen to teachings or something, but to really discuss this. And it has a very, very different quality to read something and think about it, or to be with others who have also read a little bit or heard a little bit in this direction and then discuss things. Because normally it can happen that we think we have understood the whole topic, and then when we are with others and they ask us questions, we find out that we cannot answer the questions. This is because we haven't understood the topic. Okay, so very nice that you do these discussions. Right. Look at that, we have only 60 minutes left. That's amazing, that's amazing. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, you know, with the topic of ethics, there's so many things to be said. Like one thing that I wanted to ask you, like in the past, I gave you this discussion topic, what do you think is ethics? Yeah, so we have already encountered that Buddhism is always talking about ethics in very specific contexts. It talks about ethics when it talks about karma. Yeah, so normally in the West, if we talk about ethics, we don't talk about karma. Or it talks about ethics in order to get liberated from samsara, in order to diminish your afflictions, in order to prepare you for single-pointed concentration and so forth, for the actual deep spiritual path out of samsara into a completely new world, a completely new state of nirvana. And then this kind of understanding is carried into the Mahayana, where you try to set other people on ethical discipline in order for them to be in charge of their karma and their rebirth, and in order for them to get the basis of calming the mind in the coarsest level, so you can then go to concentration and then to wisdom and liberate yourself from samsara and so forth. So all of this is not really a topic for the West. And the West also, like Greek philosophy and Roman philosophy, and I know what, or medieval philosophy, they all have talked about ethics. So what do you think is ethics? What comes up in your mind when you think about ethics? Like, why would you come to a talk on ethics? What were you thinking about to come here? So what do you think is ethics? I gave you this topic one time, no? I don't know if you discussed it.
I think it's a major subject in philosophy. Can you hear me?
Not clearly?
In philosophy, it's a major subject, ethics. So I think there are more than one typology of ethics. So I don't recall one exactly. I know that Immanuel Kant wrote about ethics at some point, and there are many others. But I don't know if this subject can honestly be answered by an individual. Maybe a philosopher can have a broader perspective, because otherwise it will be just my ideas about something that I don't know. So, but I will state my own personal mind when I talk about ethics. Maybe I will approach it from a Buddhist influence point of view, because ethics should be something about not harming others and doing the right thing. Now, I think this is where the different ethics, they confront each other, because there are ethics who say this is the right thing to do, and others who say that no, we believe there's something different that we should do. So the question is, what is the right thing to do, and how can you follow it? Because it's about the method. Okay, maybe there is a good thing to do, maybe it's a bad thing to do, and we should do the good things and avoid the bad. But is it always bad to do a thing, or is it always good to do a thing? Because if you go back in Christianity and you have the Ten Commandments, then everything is clear, right? You should not do this, and this. And if you do that, you get punished. If you go to Dante Alighieri's and you have the Inferno of Dante Alighieri, then there are the seven deadly sins. I think the 9 circles of hell. Yeah, more than that. However, the bad things are punished, and according to the good things that persons do, they can go to the purgatory, and they go to heaven if they do the righteous things. So what is ethics? That's a good question. From my point of view,
whatever brings a person to liberation should be ethical also. And
is that a Buddhist statement?
I'm not sure. I'm just saying what I get into my mind.
No, because you said liberation. I wonder what you talk with liberation. Buddhist sense?
Can be Buddhist, can be Hindu, can be just a word that expresses the idea that I will not suffer anymore forever.
Mm-hmm.
Not suffering for a while, I experienced that. The suffering comes.
So that's already quite interesting. You know, the question would be, I think one of the questions are, I like this idea of that ethics is about not harming others and doing the right thing. And indeed, we have this problem. What is the right thing? Yes, you have to have a measure against which you can measure it. You know, what's the right thing? What's the wrong thing? But also this other thing, that ethics is basically about not harming others. So somebody might say, well, that's good and well. There's some nice guys sitting over there and they talk about that they don't want to harm others. But well, why don't they want to harm others? Why would I want to practice ethics? If it's about not harming others, why would I want to practice ethics? Like, for example, if I can steal this money from this guy, I have that money. And it's maybe not the right thing to do according to some kind of mysterious kind of key of what is right and what is wrong. And maybe it harmed him. Maybe he's very sad about it. Well, tough luck. I have the money. I'm going to be on the beach tomorrow and nobody will ever find out and I'm just fine. So why would I practice ethics? So, for example, when you say the 10 Commandments say this is what to be done and otherwise you get punished, you know why you practice ethics. You don't want to be punished. So what about, so this is pretty similar to Buddhism. Yeah? If you understand that there's an inner law where you could say where you punish yourself by creating this karma. There's no one out there. There's no law, no judge, no final judgment and stuff like that. It's an inner process according to Buddhism. So here you would say, I'm practicing ethics because I want to be happy, I don't want to suffer. But I wonder how somebody outside of a religion would actually sell this idea of ethics. Is it just an intellectual game? What is right? What is wrong? Or do they have a reason why somebody would practice ethics? And what would Kant say, not just about what ethics is, but what would he say about why would you practice ethics?
Well, according to the reason, I think there are different types of ethics because there must be a purpose. And that's why I think ethics varies from century to century, from period to period, and from place to place, because they had different purposes. Of course, maybe the general idea was to be happy, but you can be happy in one way in China, and in another way in the United States of America, and another way in Europe, because the climate is different, people are different, so you can't have the same recipe of happiness everywhere.
Yeah, that's already an interesting concept. It's already an interesting concept. Yeah? So obviously you can have different methods to go for happiness, but in the end, happiness is a state of mind, right? And they have all the same mind.
I think it goes beyond the mind somehow, because mind is just a word, and I'm trying to dig, beyond words. What is mind? Did I say, oh, it's mind? I just put something in front of my search that will satisfy me and stop searching. So yeah, I can say mind, but I'm not sure exactly what mind is.
Okay, that's a very valid thing to find out what mind is, indeed. What is mind?
I'm not saying for me, but this
Yeah.
is...
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, of course, we need to use words in order to relate to actual objects, in order to communicate. Like when you meditate, you don't have to do that. Yeah? You can simply experience the mind, or you can be aware of that. You can become aware that you are aware, if you like, yeah. And so then you can express this by words and say, like, I experienced something that was not physical. It didn't have a color, it didn't have a shape, but what it was is it had some kind of an object without being the object, and it was mentally, it was kind of, aware of it, was clear about it, and had a feeling about it, liked it or disliked it or stayed neutral, but there was an experience of that. And that thing I'm going to call mind. And so the definition of mind is that which is clear and knowing. Clear meaning having an appearance. So that's of course where we start. But then we would say like there's many different minds. Hate is a mind, and love is a mind, and wisdom is a mind, and so forth. Yeah. So that phenomenon mind that takes these different forms is present in all living beings, be they Chinese or European or African or I don't know what. Yeah. So then different people and different cultures have different ideas about how they're going to achieve an experience of happiness. But the experience of happiness is going to be simply that, an experience of happiness.
So following this flow of thoughts, Buddha mind is one kind of this multiple minds that compete each other to conquer, human beings in a way. It's just the idea of a game. Like hatred is a mind, Buddhahood is a mind. Is the Buddha mind? Is the hatred mind? Is the love mind? And they occupy people. I would say people's minds. They occupy people's minds, but it's a mind that changes, and another mind comes, and there is another thing that flows into, and this hatred is not personal because it travels. It happens simultaneously in more.
I don't get that. What are you saying? Are you saying our mind is the mind of the Buddha or something?
No, I was trying to. You said that there just one mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, one mind. I mean, like there's different continua. Like you have your mental continuum, I have my mental continuum, and so forth. But this mind, this continuum of mind, that, for example, existed since I was born until now, and will hopefully last for some longer before it transforms into a completely different life form. That mind is going through all kind of phases, yeah, of happy, of dull, of interested, of not interested, of being bored, of being satisfied, of being angry or upset with something, and so forth. Yeah? It's the same mind. It takes different shapes, but all these different shapes. I may say shapes just figuratively, because actually it's not a physical phenomenon. It doesn't have shape, but it takes these different aspects, let's say, yeah. And all these different aspects are all a form of being aware in a hateful way, in a dull way, in an interested way, in a loving way, but they're all experiences. They're all mind. And they all are together with either a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling, or it can be even neutral. Yeah. So this is the feeling level. And somewhere there is the happiness. The happiness is one of these feelings. Happiness is a pleasant feeling. And this is generated by certain states of mind, by certain reactions to certain objects and so forth. And so normally we get this kind of states of feelings, of pleasant feelings of happiness and suffering and so forth, these experiences, by way of relating to objects or situations or people. And so in other words, we have all our individual, either culturally defined or individually defined methods, what kind of object to run after, or what kind of conversation, or what kind of appreciation from others, or rank or position, and this might make us happy or make us feel safe, and then this feeling safe makes us happy, and so forth. Yeah. So this is kind of the methods that we use, and so seemingly the Chinese using a method of eating bats in order to get happy. That's what they say. And here we don't do this. We do other things. Yeah, we eat other things like sausages. I don't know what. So that can differ, the method by which you get to this your experience. But in the end, we are all after experiences, either by way of the tongue, or by way of the ear, or the nose, or especially sight, yeah, or intellectual things. We are after jokes. We want to be laughing and so on. So we want to have these experiences, and within this experience, we want to have a pleasant experience. The pleasant experience is described as an experience that we would like to have again. An unpleasant experience is an experience we don't want to have again. And right there, you have the happiness and the suffering. Suffering is an experience that you don't want to have again. Happiness is an experience that you would like to have again, or you wouldn't mind to have again, and stuff like this. And then there's a neutral state as well. So that's what we all after. We all want happiness and we don't want suffering. It means that this kind of experiences. And this is the same for somebody in Australia, in China, in Russia, in Romania, in France, and I don't know where, whatever. It is even true for a human being, for an insect, for a snake, for any kind of live being, any being that has awareness, makes experiences, has within that wish to be happy and not to suffer, and is looking for this kind of happiness. So this is the same. The question is just, by what means are we trying to achieve that? And then also these means are normally quite the same, by way of food, drink, sound, entertainment, touch, vistas. Like obviously, it seems like everybody's trying to look at sunsets and sunrises and so forth, maybe all over the world, same thing. But then what they eat and what they drink is different. So that is getting very, very specific. And the interesting thing is also that on these very, very tiny differences, we are then hooking and saying like, oh, they are Chinese and we are European. But actually we do the same thing. We're running after food and drink and want to hear sounds. Okay, the different sounds from a Chinese opera maybe, but anyway, we're doing the same thing. And basically from the Buddhist point of view, we all do the same thing by trying to become happy by running after external substances, or external situations, or relations, and so forth. We are not trying to have happiness from inside out, to simply be a source of happiness in our mind. And as long as we do that, that we run after these outer situations, we are completely prey to any change that is happening in the outside world. Any moment, the method might not work anymore, the conversation might go bad, the relationship might turn sour and so on. We are completely in the hands of impermanence. We will never get a lasting fulfillment. So there's a completely different way. So that's what the Buddha is talking about, or maybe even Hinduism is talking about. So that there is ways of generating lasting, stable happiness and bliss inside of us. Yeah, because if this is developed, if there's a freedom brought about in the mind where this happiness is actually experienced, it makes a lot of sense to look there for the method of happiness rather than outside. The actual experience, the actual place of happiness is inside in the mind. Yeah, so as long as we don't go there, we are all in the same pot. If we are Chinese or from Ghana or from Portugal, it doesn't matter. We do the same thing. We're running after external phenomena, and we are losing. We're losing the race. And in the end, we die. And then we want to have another body to run after more situations and more substances and stuff like this. And then we die. So that's not going to work, the Buddha says. And that's what Buddhism is about. It's talking about what we're doing right now and how we try to get happy. And then the actual thing is that the Buddha says there is a completely different road that can be taken. And so this road is so alien to us that it will be difficult for us even to understand what the Buddha is talking about, what he's even suggesting. But the first step for that is ethics. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know, I would like to know what like Kant and these kind of people, anyway, the philosophers outside of religion, why would they say you want to be ethical? Yeah, they wouldn't probably necessarily think there's a punishment or something like this. I don't know if they would go so far to be ethical makes happy. Yeah, so that would be interesting if they would say that. Because otherwise, really, the question is, why would I want to be ethical? Yes?
I think there's a sense of duty.
A sense of duty?
Yes, some philosophers, like I don't remember, I can't name one right now. But morality is a sense of duty, and morality and ethics that it should go towards a goal in order to be responsible to yourself, your family, the world around you, and of course, yeah, this is Christianism. Of course, it is Christianism, but then again, there are many philosophers and many types of ethics, and there are differences because they think that this should be done like this or that and so on. I recall a few philosophers in my head, but I forgot exactly their ideas because that's a long time ago.
I think Kant was saying, because he said duty, Kant was saying something about that he found a moral law inside of himself. I think one time he said something like, there is this moral law. He was standing under the sky and looked at the stars, and he says there is the moral law inside and the law of the universe outside, or something like that. So as if there is an inner law, which is interesting because this might be the law of karma. Like that. Anyway. So anyway, I was just kind of juggling this idea of how other non-religious systems, which are not talking about punishment or inner processes, how they would come to this idea of ethics in the first place. Maybe something you would like to explore amongst each other more in the next discussion group.
Well, there is an ethics in Islam as well. I mean, they have it. It's the ethics of Allah. He gave precisely what orders about what to do or not to do to people, including going to work. And this hasn't anything to do with happiness. It's the duty that God imposes on the people.
Yeah, so that's very true.
Later, when after they die, they will rejoice in paradise. They go to jihad and do the right thing. Which is, of course, there are debates if the jihad is outside war or is the inside war, because the big jihad should be the inside war, the war with yourself, to conquer yourself. And generally speaking, I think they all point to the same idea that even the Buddhism points at, which is to focus on yourself and concentrate. Because, okay, what is yourself? Who are you? Where? Inside this chest, inside the head. Outside, it's more difficult to find yourself. Like I won't imagine myself to be the chair, but somehow, personally, I have the superstitious belief that somewhere here it's me. But actually, I know, I realize that it's not true. I realize this is not true because even this body is somehow outside. There is something that observes this body, and the inside, outside is the same thing. They're all outside. I can observe them. So sometimes I observe that I observe, and it's quite weird because there are no problems. But there is nothing, no speech, simply peace. It's like that. It makes no sense, but sometimes I'm there, but then again I cling to different people or foods or ideas, and I want to do things and that and that and that. Then I again observe that I observe that I eat, and what I realize is like you can have food, you can have drinks, and it's more important the attitude that you're having this outside things, whatever they are, thoughts or food or whatever you're doing. If you have a specific attitude, it brings you somewhere, and another attitude brings you somewhere else. You can enjoy the food, or you can blame the cook, and you will experience something different. This attitude. So somehow it depends on yourself, but even that attitude is outside yourself. So the question will be, how would you go to that state of mind, or what would be the law that will give you the right behavior and the power to do it in order to actually bring yourself to that focused and self-centered mind that will not grasp things and try to use things in order to get happy, because that's not the way.
So maybe that's a good point to end on, because I think we have another session on ethics, isn't it? Yeah, I have to say something about this also. But if you want to have a discussion group before that, maybe you could take one of the points that you just mentioned. What are the things that are stopping you from being ethical? Yeah, what kind of inner workings are there that kind of guide you into complete different areas, which later on you feel like, oh, that wasn't so good. Yeah, so how do you end up in unethical behavior, for example? Because obviously, if you want to be ethical, then you want to know what makes you unethical, and why does this happen in the first place? Yeah, so what are the factors that are bringing you to away from virtue, away from ethical behavior? What makes you harm others, for example? Yeah? We go back to that, and then also, if you want to bring about a practice of ethics where you want to abide in ethical behavior, where you don't harm others, how would you battle these inner problems that are bringing you to unethical behavior? How would you counteract these patterns that bring you away from ethics? Yeah. So what is it in your life Well, first of all, you need to check if there is something like unethical behavior in your life. Yeah, because if there's not, then you don't need to practice ethics because you're already ethical. But if there's something like this, like in your speech, for example, or I don't know, maybe different ways, what are the factors that make me do these unethical things? Yeah. And if you have identified them, how could I get rid of these? Because I would like to bring about a practice of ethics. Yeah. So maybe this is something that you could discuss amongst each other. And as a suggestion, how would love and compassion play into that? Yeah, what does love and compassion have to do with ethics? What does love and compassion have to do with battling those structures, those patterns inside of us that make us unethical, that make us harm others, and so forth? So how does this fit in? Yeah, maybe you could discuss along these lines, but of course, as always, the discussion is completely open. You can go wherever you want to. I need to say the following. Next Thursday, let me have a look here, which might be the 12th. Yeah, I'm not here. So actually from today onwards, we don't have teachings here in Nalanda. So me as later also I have free, therefore. So I could offer something before that, if another day is good for you. But I cannot offer the next Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th. Yeah, then I'm busy. Our Geshe is teaching in Vienna, and I'm asked to follow as a translator. So I will not be there the 12th and after. So I could offer you, because we already I had to skip last time, which I'm sorry for, but it was too packed here. I could offer you another day if that's good with you. So you can discuss that.
Yeah.
Basically, simply cannot offer the 5th or the 12th or the 13th. Yeah, just to inform you.
Robina next weekend. So
What was that?
Robina she will come next weekend. Next week. Yeah. I will write you down, okay? I will talk with people and I will write you down.
Yeah, that would be good. So discuss this, and I offer to do it on another day. Otherwise, we have to skip next week. Yeah?
Probably skip, but I will talk with people to see.
Okay. Cool, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank
Keep
you.
up the good work. You're the hope of Romania. Good
Thank
night. Bye-bye.
Bye.